Heyo, it's Freeloader from Team AQZ. Welcome to my YouTube channel. You might know me from Altered Tournament commentaries over on Twitch, but today I'm doing something a little bit different here on YouTube. I'm going to make a set review video for Whispers of the Maze, and I'll be looking specifically at the Axiom cards this time around. I hope you enjoyed the video, and before we get into the review, let's quickly go over the rating system. Alright, so I will be rating cards for the classical constructed altered metagame, including uniques nulls. So this is not for draft or NUCs or other formats like 2v2 either, and I'm sure some of it will apply, but largely this is just for normal constructed altered. I'm going to give each card, both their rare and common versions, a rating from 1 to 5 stars. 1 star means I expect a card to see absolutely no competitive play, and very little testing even. 2 stars means I expect a card to see not that much competitive play. Maybe it will come out in some fringe decks or build around strategies, but largely not too impactful for the metagame. 3 stars would mean that I expect a card to see play either as a filler card or maybe even quite regular play, but not as a card that is the driving force behind a deck. This is definitely a bit the loose category where a lot of cards will fit into, but so be it. 4-star cards are powerful cards. These will be build around cards at the center of strategies for their respective decks. I expect these cards to not be put into mana very often just because of how powerful they are. And then finally, 5-star cards are going to be absolutely game breaking. They're either going to be so efficient or flexible or just overall strong that they will completely knock out other cards in terms of what they can do. These cards either single-handedly spawn decks or are automatic includes in every deck of the faction, and are just really powerful. Alright, also keep in mind this is all mostly for fun and giggles and to see how right or wrong I was in a couple months from now. And now that we've gotten all of that out of the way, let's get into these Axiom cards. The first one up is Sapniffer. Sapniffer, it's a nice 1-cost card, a good cheap card to add to the pool of 1-cost cards that exist in Axiom. However, I think it is competing with mostly better options. There might be a bit of a niche for it somewhere, but I just think the augment keyword is slightly too conditional for this to be consistently good. Might see that play in some of the specific build around decks for it though. I think for the rare, the upgrade, it's just not quite worth the rare slot. I'd be surprised if it sees a lot of play. For that reason, at common, I'm giving this a 3-star rating, and at rare, a 2-star rating. Next up, we have Designer Drone. Designer Drone, it's a cheap play from hand, but free cost from reserve is always difficult. We have seen quite a lot of Braavos cards with the stat distribution. It's always hard to make these cards work, just because having cheap cards from reserve is naturally really good as an after you play, while as soon as you hit that free mana point, it just becomes a bit too easy for your opponent to guarantee a trade, which kind of caps how good a card like that can often be. I think both of these cards are outdone by a lot of other things. The rare specifically is very comparable to Foundry Engineer, where in the best case you're getting slightly better stats than Foundry Engineer for a similar effect, but the worst case is looking a lot worse indeed. So for that reason, Designer Drone is going to get from me a 2-star rating at common and a 2-star rating at rare as well. The Grems look very powerful to me. At common especially, this seems like a near auto include in any deck. It has that flexibility. If you're up against cheap permanents, you can just get rid of those from reserve, and otherwise there's still a lot of use you can make out of that other ability. There's a lot of expedition permanents extra that you can sack potentially in Axiom, as well as some landmarks even that will synergize with this effect. So for that reasoning, the Girems at common is getting a 5-star rating from me. At rare, the upgrades aren't that impressive. There's a singleton stat point in that forest expedition, as well as the potential removal on permanents going up by 2 to a 5 cost. And I think this will only see play if the meta does revolve around 4 and 5 cost permanents specifically. Then you might see some Grems being upgraded in their rarity in these Axiom decks. Next on the chopping block is Dreger Drone. And Dreger Drone, it's one of these cards that has this from reserve effect of getting boosts at noon. If you exhaust it, gets more. And for the most part, all of these cards are just looking a bit tricky to make work to me. They're not worth it if you immediately play them from reserve on the following turn. Often, even if you get 2 boosts on them, they're not quite there yet where I would like to see them at. A lot of them have awkward costs, and Dreger Drone is definitely among them. Again, it's this 2 cost from hand, 3 cost from reserve. It's just clunky, and Axioms is a class that really likes playing from their reserve as well. So, because of all of these things, and the best case for Dreger Drone from reserve is that 3/4/4 resupply for 3 cost, which, while good, if you take into account how much effort it takes to get there, I just don't see it all that much. Especially also for the rare upgrade. This rare upgrade of just choosing where you can remove the counter from, rather than just itself, is like a conditional +1/+1/+1. But yeah, I don't have too much faith in these types of cards. So Dreger Drone at common is going to be 3-star, and at rare is going to be a 1-star card for me. Following this up with Drillmo, which to me is largely a very similar card, having that same from reserve effect. It does sabotage from reserve, and because of that, it is immediately comparable also because of its cost to Tinkerbell. And in the best case, this does provide 1/1/1 more stats than Tinkerbell from that reserve, but again, it's just a lot more effort getting it there. And for a sabotage in particular, this will be in your reserve for quite a long time, and your opponent will really see that sabotage coming, so they get to play around it to the maximum. So, much like the cards before, I don't have too much faith in this Drillmo, and it is getting at common a 2-star rating for me, and at rare a 1-star rating. Then we are getting to Shortage Supervisor. This card is a bit of a bland card. The effect of it doesn't matter all too much in my opinion, as you're rarely going to be looking to have your hand empty, and it's more occasionally going to be the case. For that, this card is just lackluster stat-wise. At least with it being a 2/3/2, you will have situations where you can play it from hand without immediately giving up 1 or even 2 expeditions. But I still think this is very niche, and for competitive, probably not that interesting. I actually think at rare this card is arguably worse, since that free cost 2/2/2 has been something that in competitive has never really been playable. All of those cards that have that stat line to cost have just been cards you are cheating into your reserve and playing from there. And so this card is getting a 2-star at common and a 1-star at rare from me. Next up we have Abby Sapurer, which, similar to Shortage Supervisor, isn't the most flashy of effects. I do think Scout on this card helps it be a very flexible play for either 1 cost after you from hand or just a 3 cost body. That being said, again, this augment keyword, I think it's quite specific and it's a bit difficult to really make it work. And at rare, Scout 2 is even a downgrade. Yes, any number, maybe in the future this has more potential, but right now I just don't think this synergy is strong enough. And so it is getting for me a 3-star rating at common and a 2-star rating at rare. Next up is Icarus, a card I quite like from Mythology. Unfortunately for Icarus, altered competitive play, these stats, 4 cost 4/4/2, it's almost never going to be good enough to trade expeditions. And yeah, Scout is nice, but I don't know if playing a card simply to ready cards in your reserve is going to be worth it. I think the rare is worth pointing out that it has a static ability while in the reserve, and that is certainly interesting. However, I still think the card is looking overall a bit weak, and having a static ability in a reserve, we haven't seen it so far yet, but I have the feeling these cards are going to be very clunky since they're taking up a reserve slot constantly and will just limit your play patterns. So I'm giving Icarus a 2-star rating, both for its common and its rare version. Moving on to Enhanced Prototype, a bit of a big boy in the Axiom faction. This card I do also have issues with. It's a 5-cost 5/5/5, and from reserve, in the best case, it's a 4-cost 7/7/7. Yeah, while those are decently efficient stat lines, the issue is that it's still expensive enough that you're almost always going to end up trading with your opponent, and again, they do see this coming if you have the setup. So I just don't think it's going to be worth that slot in a lot of situations. At rare, this card barely gets any better, right? Percentage-wise, if you compare the rare upgrade of like an Ordis Trooper from common to rare to an Enhanced Prototype common to rare, Enhanced Prototype is getting situationally like 20% better. Meanwhile, Ordis Trooper upgrade is always getting 66% better. And that is just not worth a rare slot in my opinion. So Enhanced Prototype at common is getting a 2-star rating, and at rare is getting a 1-star rating. Next up we have Bug Fix. This card I think is going to be surprisingly good, just because in Altered there exist uniques that have the text, when a brass bug enters play, you may return a card from your reserve to your hand. Currently, these uniques in Sierra, alongside a brass bug hive, combo with mechanical training to keep bouncing mechanical trainings from your reserve to your hand, and each time you get a brass bug. Bug Fix is a second card that works with this combo, and if you can get it online, makes for some incredibly powerful turns, and the common really enables that. At rare, I don't see the upgrade of costing 1 less being all too relevant most of the time, and I think outside of this combo, Bug Fix is not a card that impresses me all too much. So, for these reasons, I am giving Bug Fix a 4-star rating at common and a 2-star rating at rare. Sap Overflow is a bit of an interesting one, because I don't think this card is very efficient in its common or its rare form. However, it is a very unique effect for Axiom. So far, if your opponent plays a Hydrocana, you have Boom or you have Sticky Note Seal as a rare, or you're not going to be dealing with that Hydrocana. Sap Overflow is a card that can help you out at common without needing to lean into the sacrifice mechanic. So because of that reason, I actually think this card is going to be quite solid, or at least it will see play despite not being that great. The rare, I just don't think these spend 1 counter upgrades are going to be doing all that much. And paying 4 to remove a permanent is already not what you want to be doing. Having that with an additional condition on there is just not going to be great as extra flexibility. So Sap Overflow is getting at common a 3-star rating for me, and at rare a 1-star rating. Bugout Bag is a card I'm really looking forward to playing. It's a 2-cost 2/2/2. That is really good so far in the game of Altered. Not only is it a 2-cost 2/2/2, but it actually has additional upside in that it will have certain permanent synergy, especially the rare for Sierra, but also it has that arrow ability that you get to trigger with your discard abilities. So, which could be relevant for Sierra, but could also be relevant for certain other decks, maybe in Traced or Subhash. So I think this card is just really solid. 2/2/2 with an upside has been quite good, as we've been seeing from the Braavos faction. And so I'm giving Bugout Bag a 4-star rating for at common and a 3-star at rare. 3-star, it's of course built around Sierra, but I think it even there is actually pretty solid. Good card. After that good one, we have Sap Extractor. Sap Extractor is interesting because outside of Keylon Cylinder, this will be our second 1-cost permanent. It's also very comparable to Keylon Cylinder in how many boosts it gives you per turn. The difference is you again need a bit of setup to get these boosts. You need a card in reserve that is already boosted, or you need something in play, another landmark that you can augment. I think this is tough enough that in most cases I would just prefer to run a Keylon Cylinder and not worry about making Sap Extractor work. At rare, it costs 2 more for having any number of targets, which I just think you're paying 2 more to make this card even harder to activate. You need to have an even more built around it deck, so I don't really see it. This card is getting a 2-star at common and a 1-star at rare from me. Then we have the Refinery. Outside of the Grems, this might be the card I am most excited for. It just has so much potential. At common, this can hit if you have a big reserve like Traced and you're feeding into that playstyle. This can give you 4 boosts in 1 exhaust action. At rare, it's free, but you're always getting those free, and you really get to choose how you use those. These boosts are extra good because you can save them for your next turn. If you already know you're trading on 1 turn, you can put boosts in your reserve, and next turn activate the Refinery again earlier. And the rare can give you 6 boosts for 1 turn this way, which is insane for a 2-cost card, and it sticks around because it's a landmark. So the Refinery is looking phenomenal to me, both at common and rare. I'm absolutely going to be trying both versions, and they are both getting the 4-star rating from me. Wouldn't be surprised if this is too low though. The final card we have for the in-faction Axiom cards is the Tech Lab unit. I think increasing the reserve by 1 is a very interesting effect and quite potent for a number of different Axiom heroes, and is going to be very interesting. At common, I think it's going to be almost exclusively a Sierra card, and at rare, I think it will be played more in Subhash and Traced. And I think this will see play, but I also don't think it is all that insanely powerfully pushed. The effect is really solid, but you're still often going to be giving up an expedition to play this without it giving you stats in play. At least not directly, so you'll have to work for that. And I'm just going to give both of these a 3-star rating, but it is a very hard effect to evaluate without getting to feel how to play it. That was it for the in-factions, and now we'll be moving to the out-of-faction cards. Starting with Junior Chef. Junior Chef does have that cost distribution I don't like, 1 from hand, 3 from reserve, but because it does not remove its own boost from reserve and has a very relevant ability attached to it, I actually have a bit of hope for Junior Chef. I still don't like this at noon exhausting it to give it 2 boost or just gaining 1 boost. It's just gonna take a while to ramp up, but this might be the first card that I feel motivated to try and do it with. So Junior Chef is getting a 3-star rating from me. Another Braavos out-of-faction rare is the Braavos Excavator. This one I don't love in its out-of-faction form. It only can target augmented cards to give that extra boost. Compared to that, the common one from Braavos can boost any character in reserve. Yeah, Augment can do a couple additional things, but I just don't think the general utility is there yet. And because of that, Braavos Excavator is just getting a 1-star rating from me. Then we have Hestia. Hestia looks like a pretty unimpressive card for me. I don't think you ever really want to play this from hand or reserve, but it has another static ability while in the reserve, with you may pay 1 to give a character you just played boost. I think in general this isn't going to be worth it. Paying 1 for 1 boost isn't a great ratio. It's also, it doesn't work as an after you effect. So you're going to give your opponent a lot of information and you're going to be spending your mana fast. Also, as I said earlier, using a reserve slot to hold a static ability passively in your reserve is going to be expensive in terms of card resources. So I don't love Hestia for those reasons. Still, it's a very unique effect, and that's why it's getting a 2-star rating from me. Alright, now Swiftgin is a card I'm looking forward to. It's really interesting to finally get a ramp effect in Axiom. It's a faction I think where ramp is very scary since they have a lot of explosive things they can be doing once they have more mana. That being said, I don't think Swiftgin is a great card. If you're using it for its scout effect and then putting the Swiftgin you just played into your mana zone, which, while it's nice that you can do it, that is worse than the mana channeling at common in the Braavos faction, a card that has not really seen any play so far. If you're paying the full 6 for this card, 5/5/3 is not very great stats either. You're likely going to be losing the expedition and the other expedition as well when you play this, so going down 2 expeditions to ramp up a little bit, I don't think this is worth it even in Axiom. Swiftgin is going to get a 2-star rating from me as well. Sap is a really interesting one. I don't 100% know how to evaluate it. It's nice that it's a cheap after you effect, but it does make you very susceptible to sabotage and exhaust effects potentially. I also don't think most of the Axiom heroes have the card advantage to play a card like this, so I'm looking this mostly as a trace card where you can dig this, you have the card advantage to be able to play these cheap cards, and you can also manipulate where you're putting those boosts with that traced hero ability quite easily. So because of traced, I'm gonna still give this a 3-star rating, but wouldn't be surprised if it sees very little play. Bliss Tarist is, man, I would really love to like this card, but it's going to be hard to get a boost on this when you're playing it from hand. I mean, not too hard, you do have cards like Keel on Cylinder, but even if you do, needing to flip specifically a robot or a permanent is actually quite difficult to do in the Axiom faction. You will not be able to guarantee this effect goes off, and because of that, it's probably just not going to be reliable enough for a rare slot. This is getting a 1-star rating from me. Bliss Drummer is another card from the same band with the same problem. It's already expensive, and only reducing the cost of robots is just not good enough in the current metagame. Or not in the current metagame, but with the current card pool. There's just not all that many robots, even in Axiom, that you want to be playing. Maybe in the future this gets better as we get more robots added into the game, but I think for now this is just a 1-star card. Ephron the Puppet Master is an interesting card. It's very mid-rangey for an Axiom card. This doesn't feel like one of these Axiom cards that we've seen for most of this set reveal. A 5-cost 4/4/4 from hand with a sabotage or resupply isn't the worst thing in the world. It's not something that I think I would play usually, and I don't like how the difference in these effects. Historically, we've seen on uniques a lot of like, if you roll a 4+, draw a card, otherwise resupply. That's fine because both of those effects are in the same vein. One of these effects for Ephron, however, is interactive, while the other is based on card advantage, and that just seems unreliable to me, since you don't know what you're getting. Sometimes you're going to get the sabotage when you need a resupply, sometimes you're going to get a resupply when you really need to sabotage something, and I think that's going to feel really bad for a rare slot. Scout 2 I don't think helps this card a whole lot either, because neither of these effects are worth 2 mana even if you know what you're getting. From reserve, a 3-cost 4/4/4 is fine, but again, not a reason to go out of your way to play this card. Still, because of its interesting effect and stat distribution to cost distribution, I'm going to give this card a 2-star rating. After skipping the Muna faction entirely, as there are no out-of-faction Axiom cards from Muna, we head to the Ordis out-of-faction ones, starting with Staff Clerk. And man, this card is so close to being so good. If it said instead of when you play, when a card leaves your reserve, for example, or when a card enters your reserve, if it said instead of create a token in my expedition, in any expedition, this card would be so interesting. But the way it works right now, it only threatens to win that one expedition, and you need to play a lot of cards to guarantee it. I mean, even just to get like a decent rate out of this card, which in my mind you would want at least a 4/4/5, you would need to play 3 cards from your reserve after already investing mana into Staff Clerk. I just don't think that is worth the effort, even in the decks that do abuse these kinds of reserve chains. So I'm gonna give Staff Clerk a very sad 2-star rating. I would love to rate this card higher. I would play the living hell out of it, but not quite there in my opinion. The next card we're taking a look at is this Aegus Templar. I actually quite like this card. It has some really interesting utility. You can play it as a 2-cost or a 3-cost for a very similar kind of stat line, but then also when you play it as a 3-cost, it actually lets you keep a Brass Bug into the following turn. Axiom often struggles with this in-between turn continuity outside of its landmarks, and I think this could actually end up being quite strong for them, especially if you understand your timings in the game. That being said, it's still not a super explosive, super flashy card. I don't think there's going to be any driving deck building ideas behind this, so I'm going to give Aegus Templar a 3-star rating. Meset is the final Ortus out of faction card for Axiom, and it is an interesting one. I think it's only really going to see a ton of play in Sierra, and I don't 100% know how to evaluate this. Because even in Sierra, if you play this, you're likely still losing both expeditions, as that Sierra hero ability only gives you a 2/2/2. But even then, you're in the exact spot you want to be in when you play this card. You're going to be behind on the expeditions, or even, and get that Brass Bug. And then Meset, if you curve out Meset into Brass Bug Hive, that's going to be really, really powerful as well. And I think there's a lot of potential in this card, and still I don't love it all that much. It's a bit hard to evaluate, so I'm just going to stick in the middle and give it that 3-star rating. Moving on to the Yizmir Nurse. This card is in an archetype that I don't think has enough support yet. This sacrifice theme in Axiom, there's just not enough cards that want to be hit here. We have that one landmark that does sabotage when it leaves play, but other than that, we have a couple expedition permanents, but not enough to support a card like Yizmir Nurse. Maybe in the future it gets better. For now, I'm giving it a 2-star rating. The next card on the chopping block is Merlin. And Merlin has, like we talked about earlier with Sap Overflow, a very desirable effect for Axiom, in that it can discard a character or permanent. It even has that Scout 4, so it has a bit of interesting utility there. But I just don't think a 6-cost 3/3/3, or even from reserve a 3-cost 3/3/3, will make you want to play Merlin over said Sap Overflow. And for that reason, I'm going to give Merlin a 2-star rating. 2-star, it's still interesting, but I doubt we'll see a whole lot of Merlin being played. Evanessence, on the other hand, is a really, really interesting card. It is a 2-cost removal in Axiom, which Axiom is sorely lacking as a faction. Not only that, it's maybe the first Axiom card with this in reserve ability, where it gets 1 arcane counter, and if you exhaust it gets 2. It's the first one that I feel like will feel good to play even if it only has 1 additional arcane counter on it. And that is really interesting to me. The potential upside on Evanessence from reserve, and the way it forces your opponent into really awkward play patterns, might end up being incredibly strong. I could definitely see this card falling flat or falling short of expectations, but I'm going to have my hopes up high and give this card a 4-star rating. And the final card that we are rating for this video is the Nile Spires. Nile Spires, it's a pretty interesting landmark. I think it's mostly a contender for Sierra, and mostly a contender for Sierra where you're playing a lot of expedition permanents that cost 3 or more, such as the Bugout Bag. And even then though, I still think that getting 3 arcane counters onto it is quite hefty. just for a 2/2/2 brass bug. And I mean, it's an interesting one. I'm definitely going to try building around it, but I do not have my hopes up very high, and for that reason I'm giving it a 2-star rating. Alright, that concludes the Axiom set review and my rambling about what is definitely going to be the most accurate predictions you will ever witness in any TCG. I hope you liked the video, wink wink, and hopefully I will see you around for the next one I make. Have a great day, everybody.